Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Tech Report podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Drake, joining you for yet another episode of the official podcast of the Tech Report. That's techreport.com, the #1 place for computer news. Oh boy, I almost lost it. For computer hardware news and reviews. This is going to be a major CES episode. And I know that, you know, lots of different news outlets are going to cover the various ins and outs of CES, everything from the automotive side to the drones to the TVs. But of course, what you'll get from us, and what I'm excited to dive into with our team, who I'll introduce in a second, is of course the PC hardware side of the CES story. We've got lots to talk about. We had our man Scott on the ground, and we're also joined by Scott Wasson, he's here, by Jeff Gager and Cyril Kowalski, who did some remote reporting. Am I correct in that, Scott? You were the only one who's actually there in person, correct?
Yeah, in fact, I was kind of wanting to open with just talking about this because it's going to be weird understanding who's discussing what on the show based on experience, but we have been through the gamut of approaches to CES. Jordan, you went with us when I think it was the peak of our, like, send a big team to CES to cover the show.
That's right. Yep. I was the guy sitting there. You guys were taking notes on your little laptops, and I was shoving a microphone in people's faces. Can you say that into the mic?
But that show when you were there produced. You did a documentary style recap of our CES experience. That was I was actually listening to the other day. It was awesome. And
thank you.
And I need to link that in the show notes. You need to link that in the show notes. But
I will link it in the show notes. I will admit that when I listen to it now, it's like reading essays from high school. It's a little horrifying, but I appreciate your positive sentiment, and for the purposes of nostalgia, I will post it in the show notes.
No, it was great actually. So just whatever. But no, it was really good. And the thing is that it's a complete zoo for us. We're going like all day. We'll have like a meeting every hour for like 12 hours, and then like social functions in the evenings. And there's suites, hotel suites all over Vegas. There's booths that we sometimes have to go to on the show floor, and sometimes it's just random. You know, I have lunch with the guy from this company so he can tell you what they're doing. It's crazy, but it's the only place where everybody, only time of the year in North America where everybody in the PC hardware industry is there at one time. Yeah. And so it's a huge opportunity. And what we've done, we have sent like huge teams of people in the past, Cyril and Jeff and you, and we had like 6 or 7 people at that one CES, but we have decided over time to whittle that down because we think we can be more effective. The problem was that we all go to these meetings and we could split up and go to multiple meetings, but you do enough moving around Vegas and meeting with people and taking in information, it's very hard to write. It's very hard to sit on a little laptop punched over and try to do what you need to do. And there's a lot of information that just comes in over the internet before you can go have that meeting or whatever else. So this year was kind of the most refined version of one guy goes to the show, and actually I had Adam with me, who's our business guy, so he was there too, and doing some, of his own meetings and stuff, and then tagging along. He has
a gambling budget to try and increase revenue for the year, right? That's part of his role.
It's a better bet than trying to make money on the web. So we figure, hey, we'll try it.
Absolutely, it worked in Casino Royale for the British government.
There you go. So anyway, but then Jeff and Cyril are basically just at home chained to their desks. And what I'm doing is Jordan and I took all of my notes and all of my pictures on my iPhone 6 Plus this year.
Wow.
And
wait. All your notes, like hand typed, or like you just recorded people's voices?
No, I typed them. So
on an iPhone?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little slow, but it wasn't that bad. The deal is this. You're standing up, right? And so either you're scrolling on a notepad or you're typing on a phone. There's not really, you can't sit in a laptop and take notes.
No, that's true. That's true.
And, the phone photography has gotten good enough between image stability and the ISO sensitivity, the lenses, and the multi-shot capability of the iPhone 6 Plus, where you just hold down and do burst mode.
Yeah,
and then it selects the one that's in best focus. That you can get really quite serviceable pictures out of that. And so what I do is I go into a meeting, I take the pictures, I do the notes, and at the end of the meeting I email notes and upload pictures to Dropbox, and then the guys are like on it. And then I moved to the next one. And so it's like every hour you got a meeting, and every hour they've got something new to write about. Plus, they've got stuff coming into their inboxes and pre-briefings and all these things that we queued up. So we had, Cyril, was it 65?
Yeah, that's right.
News posts about CES this year. And I didn't actually write any of those, but I was the one who was at the show.
You know, it's kind of funny how things have come full circle, because the sort of classic, 1920s reporter image is the guy with that little tiny flip pad, writing like the detective / reporter notepad. And then slowly we were using voice recorders, and radio people use voice recorders. And then you guys were typing into laptops. And now you're just back to that same form factor. I mean, you're typing into your phone. It's like it got bigger, and then it just came back to that little flip size device. Although the 5.6 is pretty big, but still. That's a fascinating flow. That's interesting to me.
It worked really well. I mean, the thing that you have to accept when you're covering something that's this big is that you don't have a ton of depth about everything. You don't have time to go into a ton of depth about everything that's happening. But you do want to get a good sense of everything and be accurate about it. And we just found this is the best compromise. So just sort of as a preface to all the junk we're going to try to get into here, we covered the show in a sort of a distinctive way by splitting up the work like that. So.
Well, it's a lot of things coming to a head in this evening, in the sense that we haven't had a show in a while. We did a little, when I say we, I mean everyone but me, did a little sort of a halfway episode. We called it, what was it, 167.5 of the TR podcast, which is just a live stream / YouTubed conversation that you guys did. When was that? Late in December.
Yeah. This
is still the first show of 2015, so we're excited to be here. And I will say that if you haven't caught on to the trend of this thing that we do now, besides corny humor and dry PC hardware wit, is this whole thing about live streaming. So we were live streaming the show right now at twitch.tv / the Tech Report. We also then post that live stream, the recorded version, onto YouTube. So between that and downloading the podcast, you can watch / listen to this show at least 3 times per episode, because I feel like we're like a good book. You get more out of it every time you read it. Just something to think about. Don't just repeat. Try that. That's the best way to do it. Anyway, so you can watch us live, or you can just listen to us on the podcast. Either way, we're just expanding our methodology, because I think we're about 4 years behind on the podcast technology curve. So we're catching up. We're getting there.
Slowly but surely. Actually, we moved a long way in a short while here, Jordan.
We did. We made a big jump.
Yeah.
Scott was like, you know what? I want to do this live video thing. And I was like, I don't want to do my makeup every night. And he's like, you know what? You're going to have to deal with it. And, we came to a compromise. So we're in a good place. And I will have to eat some dinner later on. So you all are just going to have to suck it up, and I'll mute it. And no one's going to know. And it's going to be fine. Okay. Let's talk about Nvidia's Tegra X1 system on a chip. It has 8 cores, Maxwell graphics, and this was a pre-CES conference. Now, was this like the day before? Like, where and when was this held, Scott?
It was Sunday night before CES started.
Got it. Okay.
So it was a press conference in Las Vegas. Yeah. It was just one of the first things that, really most of CES for the press, or at least not most, a big chunk of it happens before the show opens, because the press conferences and some of the keynotes of speeches, things like that, the briefings happen before the show opens. And so this was just the first of many things, but it was definitely CES. It was right there.
I will say, just as an aside, given that my background is in PR, and I'm actually doing a new job, which we won't talk about in this episode. I'm going to save it for the next episode. But, one of the things that we spend a lot of time focusing on in the PR world is like when to do an event or a press conference or a party or whatever, because particularly around these big events like Comic-Con or CES, it's all of like, what events are we competing with, and when are the journalists going to be there, and how do we make sure we get enough people to fill the room, and it's a whole art and science of where and when do you do these things. And so obviously, to your point, sometimes pre-CES is the best time to make sure you're going to get that foot traffic you need to, make sure the PR person can validate their salary.
Yeah, and I think they did a live stream of this, right, guys? You guys watched it, didn't you?
There's that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I was there like, oh, I'm here in person doing this important reporting thing, and they're like sitting at home writing it up, like watching live. So I don't know how useful I was, but
tell us about it. Tell us about Tegra X1 and make yourself useful, Scott.
Yeah, so Tegra, we kind of have a tradition now that Nvidia is doing new Tegra stuff at CES each year, and this is the next generation. It's really an announcement of a chip. Well, they're working. I guess they have working silicon that they demoed, but it's not yet shipping in anything. But this is the announcement of a new chip that is Maxwell-based graphics. So the interesting thing about it is that it's a successor to the Tegra K1, which is Kepler-based, and it's Maxwell-based. It's more power efficient because the Maxwell graphics architectures we know from the desktop is more power efficient, and you can kind of see how they were aiming to bring that type of goodness into the mobile space where there's a real need for power efficiency. The other thing that's interesting about this is that they are using ARM CPU cores and not doing a Project Denver version of it, at least right out of the gate. So the first version of this, Tegra X1, has 4 Cortex-A57 relatively large ARM cores, and then it has not a single 5th shadow core as they've done in the past, but 4 small Cortex-A53s, which is a big .little config. Big little is ARM's way of kind of using 2 different CPU architectures on the same chip to extend the power efficiency of the CPU beyond what it could do just by scaling voltage and clock frequency. And so they actually hand off threads from the big chip to the little one or vice versa, depending on the most efficient operating point for that workload. So really big heavy thread that needs to run quickly goes on the Cortex-A57, but you may have some constant things like some little thing that pulls the GPS or something that you could just leave on the Cortex-A53 and it'd be more power efficient there. So they've got 8 cores on the chip, although the way that big little works, you're going to divide the work between 4 cores here and 4 cores there. You're not usually going to use all 4 or all 8 at once. In fact, I believe that all that they're doing with this version of Tegra is what's called cluster switching between the 4 small cores and the 4 big cores when the workload demands. So they're not even doing like there are more sophisticated versions where it's like you switch from the big to the small CPU in pairs, depending on the threads, or there's one where all the cores are available and you just schedule based on what's most efficient. They're not doing that. I think they're just doing a cluster swap. So anyway, point is they've got a new config on the CPU side. They've got a new Maxwell GPU architecture that's brought into mobile, and kind of the interesting question is where they're going to sell this thing. The performance numbers that they showed basically the graphics of the thing outperforming the Tegra K1, which is the last generation, and Apple's A8X, which I
thought that was an interesting comparison. They went straight for it.
Yeah, well, there aren't many really more graphically capable SoCs than the A8X. And if you look at where Nvidia has put its products, like one of the few shipping Tegra Denver products is that Nexus 9. So it really is a 10-inch tablet or 9-inch that isn't, yeah, 9-inch that is one of the few targets that they've got that is in consumer devices. At this point, they really aren't playing in phones, and they have their own Shield tablet and Shield portable stuff, and then they've got that design win and a few other things. So the other thing that we saw a lot of talk about in NVIDIA's press conference, in fact, Jordan, like this bit about the Tegra K1 was a teeny part of it, and they segged right into this long explanation about how this chip could be used in automotive. And you get they talk way too long about it, but you get the sense they're already selling into infotainment systems in cars, but they have sensed that NVIDIA sensed there's a big market for computer vision and the processing of all the camera data that's on cars now for either driver assist or potentially self-driving cars in the future. There's a need, if you're going to do that well, for lots of computing power. And the GPU is probably the right kind of processor to process that visual input. So, yeah, Cyril, I think you wrote up that bit, which to me seemed like it was interminable when they were talking about it. But they had a lot to say about
it's just the graphics of like a dashboard system. I mean, the picture that I'm seeing here, it's not.
Well, it's not just that.
But that's an example of what they were referencing.
Yeah, there's actually two systems. There's one that does all the dashboards, the HUD. I mean, whatever is graphical that you're going to need to render. You know, like in the Tesla, you've got this kind of display instead of, you know, to control everything in the car. So this will do that with like fancy gauges and stuff that can apparently like emulate the materials used in the car itself. I don't know like if it's really necessary to like render that in real time. You could probably animate it very well, but you know, it's kind of cool to be able to do that. You can have different effects and sort of change it, customize it. But they also introduced another system which they call an autopilot car computer. This seems to be like a driver assist type of thing that sort of it's designed to hook up to a lot of different cameras, and it has two Tegra X1 chips, and it sort of uses neural networks to sort of try to process and understand the environment. It's kind of cool. It's kind of hard to describe, but the demo they showed was pretty cool. Apparently the neural network based detection system is a lot more accurate than like what's used currently, and it actually can be more accurate than humans, which is pretty neat.
I feel like you're about 3 words away from saying cybernetic organism over human endoskeleton. I don't know, just like it was so close.
Next year.
Next year. I will say it was interesting that this is an odd twist to this whole conversation, but in the aviation world, my dad was a pilot, my grandfather was a pilot. I grew up around planes a lot, and you know, the idea of a glass cockpit where you have all of your instruments provided by LCD screens and not you know, physical gauges has become popular in the past decade or so. You look at most, you know, if you're walking into an airplane, if the cockpit door happens to be open, you'll see a lot of big displays that display your artificial horizon, all that kind of thing. But any of those systems you see, there's always going to be somewhere in the dash, there'll always be these 6 gauges. There's an altimeter. There's a speedometer. They don't call it a speedometer term. What it's called. But anyway, there's gauges that are totally run without any electronics. It's total backup. Everything else fails. You still have the ability to know how high up you are and your rate of acceleration and artificial horizon, all that stuff based on like physics. So it occurs to me that with all the stuff we have with cars, like what is the fail-safe if this stuff breaks down for speedometers, for all these things? Now, to be fair, you can just stop the car. You're not in an airplane. But, you know, technology breaks, particularly fancy technology like that looks, you know, more like a home theater system and less like a car dashboard. It's like, what happens when your fuel gauge isn't reading correctly? Like, is there an actual gauge with a leveler inside a tank? Like, that's what goes through my mind with all this.
Yeah. They actually showed a version of their little product for cars where it had 2 SoCs. And the SoCs could be used for different jobs, or they could be used one backing the other up. So there's already, Jordan, hardware deployments where they're building in redundancies.
Interesting.
And so I think that's maybe what's going to go, the direction it's going to go. Because you're right, they're going to have to be hardened and they're going to have to be reliable in order to take the wheel, which is a ways off. But anyway, this is just interesting because Nvidia has spotted a market where their computing power could be useful. And so they did a couple of things technically with the X1, like the Maxwell GPU in it could compute FP16, 16-bit floating point, which is maybe useful for mobile graphics, but more useful for the computer vision stuff, where they think that's enough precision to do the vision work, but they can get twice the throughput of doing 32-bit floating point. So that's kind of nifty. The next thing up is, let's move on though, is Broadwell U. There's a lot of chip news. This is one of the major ones around CES that we kind of knew was coming. So this is this is Intel's next generation 14 nanometer Broadwell that we've seen in the Core M, but this is the Ultrabook and laptop version. So Cyril, I think you wrote this up.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't like too exciting. One of the chips is the same, I believe, as the one they used in the Core M, and that one powers, I think, about half the lineup. And the other half is, or well, maybe not quite half, maybe like a third, is based on a slightly larger version that has the same number of cores, same number of cache. Everything's the same except the integrated graphics has twice the number of execution units, so they've gone from 24 to 48, which is supposed to, improve performance by a fair bit. They say, from 20 to 50% depending on the actual model. So that's 17 chips in total. They're supposed to be about the same price as current Haswell U chips, and they can be swapped into the same motherboards. So Intel is saying this is going to be like one of their fastest launches ever. They're rolling out everything at once. The consumer SKUs, the business sort of corporate type models. Laptop makers are going to be able to roll out machines very quickly. Some are going to be based on existing motherboards and chassis. Some are going to be new. But yeah, we're going to be seeing a lot of Broadwell U machines in stores probably over the next month or two.
Yeah, I mean, it had to happen, or it's good that it happened, I think. But I think we've lost Jordan, guys.
I'm still here. I just decided to do the non-eating cam version.
Ah, okay. Whoa!
People tune in for your good looks, though, Jordan. You're going to disappoint a subset of our audience.
Not when I'm chewing like a cow eating cud. I just I gotta keep it under wraps,
All right. Our stream is not going to look very pretty. We apologize for that.
Wait. Really? Is it messed up? I thought
yeah. No. It's kind of messed up.
I'm sorry. Oh, because hold on.
Bring out the
chimp. I'm going to have to do it. I don't know what else we do.
You know what? Is the chimp eating? No. Okay, bring out the chimp.
Let's see.
I think we can probably harness the power of the internet to find a picture of a chimp eating.
I think. Oh, we could, but that might take more time than we have.
But I don't know, Jeff. That sounds like a pretty worthwhile endeavor.
Do not fail me now, Google.
I think we've got live stream will reflect shortly that we've got the chimp back.
Oh, here we go. We found a photo. Please hold. Oh, this could be good. If it'll freaking download.
Maybe this one is a little. That one's too small. Highly technical work we do here at Tech Report.
I'm sorry. I'm a fan of that. That's good. Now I want watermelon.
All right. I'm missing that picture.
It was sent in the chat.
If I look in the chat, it messes up our live stream.
You know what? Let's focus on technology.
Okay.
And not on me.
Something happened with,
as much as I love it.
Right. Something happened with Broadwell U. Anyway, so Broadwell U replaces Haswell U, and we have Ultrabooks and stuff at the show based on it, and that was where we are, I think. So the next thing that was a bit of a surprise is Intel went ahead and launched Cherry Trail 2. Jeff, you wrote that up, right?
Sort of launched it without really saying anything about it. It's
right.
Sort of Cherry Trail is shipping. The first systems are coming in the first half of 2015. It'll be in Windows and Android devices. It'll have good battery life, and that's it. So they haven't really told us really anything about the chip, but the fact that it is shipping already, and then we'll see first systems in the first half of this year, kind of gives us a timeline of roughly when we can expect more information about this. So this will be the successor to Bay Trail, which will probably come out, I would expect, initially in low-power Atom chips, and then we might see sort of Celeron and Pentium versions of those, or that silicon like we did with Bay Trail. But I would expect we're going to see sort of cheaper tablets first, and then maybe sort of some net-top style devices, and maybe some less expensive laptops, and then maybe even Chromebooks.
Yeah. Oh, I've lost the chimp, guys. This is my fault. That's back. Okay, it's very important. Yeah, I didn't see Cherry Trail devices floating around at the show, Jeff. Which is one reason it seems like maybe this is a bit of a surprise. But
you know, when they say first half too, that tells me, you know, like maybe Computex timeline. I think maybe a lot of the companies that would be launching Cherry Trail tablets, I'm thinking sort of low-cost tablets, might be some of the sort of the Chinese and Taiwanese tablet companies. So I would expect probably something in that time. I mean, hopefully we learn more about it before then, but based on the fact that new Bay Trail tablets launched at CES, one of which we'll get to a little later on, I don't think Cherry Trail is imminent.
yeah. So the other thing that they introduced was this wearables thing, the Curie module, which, Cyril, you wrote it up. It looks like it's the size of, like, smaller than a penny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is meant to power like really tiny wearables, and it gets into this kind of weird twilight zone of, you know, smart buttons and smart bracelets.
Buttons like for your shirt, like buttons.
Yeah, literally, yeah, apparel style buttons. So I'm not sure exactly what the point of it is.
It's wearables.
It's wearables.
It's wearables.
It's the Internet of Things. Everything has to have the internet.
Internet of pants.
But right, but it is actually. I mean, they do plan to commercialize it, and it's on track to ship, you know, second half of this year. So we're going to be seeing some, I guess, Intel powered pants by Christmas.
You know what I want? I want the fly that tells me it's down. I get a text. Hey, look down. Your door is open. That would be handy.
Status testicles zipped right into zipper. Calling 911.
Didn't need to take it that far. All right, that's cool.
Hey, if it could call, I mean, at that point you're incapacitated, and that is a medical emergency. So,
right.
Anyway, I didn't.
It's an interesting concept. This is kind of exciting to me. I mean, it's sort of, it feels like we're finally catching up to James Bond gadgetry with something like this, you know?
Yeah, this is also kind of about Intel making sure it doesn't miss the boat on something that because ARM was playing in all of these spaces with really low power, really small stuff, and Intel missed smartphones, and so I think they want to make sure that doesn't happen again, and they want to make sure that they have an offering like at every power envelope and every size so that they can play in those markets. So, you know, I know ARM has stuff this size and power as well, but this is just sort of making sure that Intel is there too. So, yeah, I didn't see this either. This was actually something that I guess, Cyril, they just did like a press release, and this is probably at Krasanich's keynote, right?
I think so. I wasn't there. I saw the press release the next day.
This picture probably came from him holding it up in the keynote with the blue background, and anyway.
Right.
But I actually had never been to a CES keynote in all the years that we covered CES, so I don't know if I should be proud of that or not, but it's just not what we do.
Well, it's a huge like time investment, and there's always like a press release or a stream, so
yep,
it's better to go to meetings.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's move to the next item on our agenda, which is more chip stuff. We got a lot of this, and this one I kind of got this news and delivered it. So I talked with AMD, and the next thing they have coming up is a Carrizo APU that replaces Curie, and it moves to the Excavator core. So it's a new version of the AMD's big x86 core, the higher power one. This is the Bulldozer family, and improves the graphics in some ways that actually we don't have a lot of insight into what generation of AMD's graphics IP will be in this chip, but my sense is it's probably the most similar to what we've seen on the desktop in the Radeon R9 285, which is the Tonga chip. The difference with Carrizo is that, you know, these APUs have traditionally kind of been focused on a laptop, but they made a desktop version, and AMD has already basically told us there will not be a desktop socketed version of Carrizo. There will be some maybe desktop systems like all-in-ones that use this chip, but for the most part, you're looking at this APU going into the power envelopes that Intel has with Haswell and Broadwell U, and that's kind of where it's going to aim. So we saw actually working silicon at the show. Had a demo laptop that looks kind of like the one in the picture here that was running. I think it was the A0 silicon. It was first revision. I don't think it's probably the final one, but it was working. It was not necessarily at the full clock speed, full capability that it will be when it's ready, but it was functional. And they had a neat demo showing it playing 4K video next to, I think, like a Core i3 that was, they're both trying to decode H.265 compressed video. The Core i3, Intel didn't until like, Cyril, I guess you just wrote this up today. Intel released H.265 decode capable drivers for like Haswell and Broadwell. So before then, like during the show, their demo was basically, it was all CPU based decompression on the Intel side, and the video was chunky, it couldn't play back smoothly. But the Carrizo in the UVD video decode block that you know from desktop Radeons, actually they've now added H.265 support, so it was playing back 4K video very smoothly without any hitches at all, and doing it at what they said was, and what should be, very low power consumption. Because custom hardware generally beats general purpose, like having a CPU do it type of thing for efficiency and power efficiency. So anyway, this is good news in the sense that AMD has a working chip. They're aiming for the middle of this year for systems based on it, and it seems like they're on track for that. It's a little bit unfortunate because you know, I think people were hoping for a desktop version. One interesting thing that they're doing with Carrizo that they kind of reiterated is that they're doing, right now they've got like, what are the latest names? Beema and Mullins are basically the low power SoCs or APUs that they ship that are not based on Bulldozer but on Jaguar, Puma, like the Cat lineup of CPU cores that are much cheaper. And they're doing this new Carrizo. It's a ball grid array instead of a socket, but it's sort of a, you know, attach this chip to your motherboard using this setup. They're doing compatible version of their low power SoC that will go right into the same infrastructure as Carrizo. They're calling that Carrizo L. And so you'll be able to, if you're a laptop maker, for instance, you could create a laptop chassis and motherboard and everything, a whole solution around Carrizo, and then you could sell a low-cost, lower-power version of it with the Carrizo L chip by only swapping out the chip on the motherboard. So by having that same infrastructure available for two classes of chip, they could have some really nice low-power, low-cost stuff, and maybe, you know, get more design wins, which for AMD is a big thing. Getting into laptops, and especially ones that sell in North American markets in good volume, has been a challenge for them because Intel has been very strong, and you know, they need to find ways to win, to be on the shelf, and this is the plan with Carrizo. So you know, I'm a little disappointed that they've come out and said there's no desktop version coming. I think that for the desktop, you know, AMD's plan is probably just to polish up Kaveri for this year and then aim for the new big cores, the Zen K12 cores, especially the x86 one, the Zen, for 2016. It's unfortunate that it's actually a 2016 thing. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I don't think they're going to have a chip shipping this year based on the new big cores. But you know, I think they're picking their battles, and maybe this is the right way to go.
Interesting.
So let's see what's next on our giant agenda.
The actual desktop.
Oh,
yeah,
they are going to polish up Kaveri, and one way they're doing that is the introducing a new version of Kaveri for the desktop, the A8 7650K. It's going to be $105. It's a quad core with 10 compute units or compute cores for the graphics. It's fairly similar to the A10 7700K, but is less expensive. So this is kind of just a bit of positioning, but it is sort of a preview of AMD's plans for 2015 for the desktop, which is honestly not a lot of change, but there's potentially some additional value that they've got there. So, yeah. Jeff, you wrote that up, didn't you? Yeah.
Yep.
There was
They
also
also launched a new chipset. They didn't really launch a new chipset, but I guess kind of advertise it. I mean, nobody pays attention, I guess, to AMD motherboards enough that they had to announce this new chipset that you can already buy motherboards based on. It's called the A68H, which is basically a pared down version of their 8 series. Or I guess they're basically using the same chip for years. So this has, only 4 SATA ports instead of 8 that you get on the full fat version. Only 2 USB 3 ports instead of the 4 that you get. You can't split the 16 PCI Express lanes evenly for a crossfire configuration. So it's really designed for lower end motherboards, and it's already listed on a couple that are under $70. And it's, a fairly basic chipset. We also got a few more details on the RAID implementation, which they actually switched a while ago when the A88X came out. They used to have a promised RAID firmware in their chipsets, and they've switched to code from .hill, which does one interesting thing, which now passes trim commands to SSDs organized in a RAID 0 array. So that's sort of one of the main bottlenecks for performance if you're running a striped SSD array, is that previous firmware that they had didn't pass these trim commands, which allow old deleted data to be sort of cleaned up by the SSD. So that should be a performance boost for the sort of handful of people who are running SSD RAID on an AMD A-series system with integrated graphics.
And what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Although I have to sort of admit that there is sort of a period where SSD RAID kind of made sense, where you have all these really cheap SSDs that, from a reliability perspective, I'd trust a lot more than I would a mechanical hard drive. So putting them in a striped RAID array is not kind of this death wish that you would think it would be with a mechanical array. And in sort of that awkward position where you've got SATA drives which are capped by the interface, and you don't really have this PCI Express infrastructure, which we're only starting to get now, that does seem like kind of an easy path to better storage performance if you have a specific need for it. It's just kind of an odd feature to trot out for a $70 motherboard.
You think? Anyway, okay.
It's something Intel has been doing for years as well. So this is sort of them catching up to something that the competition has had available for quite some time.
Yeah, I'm glad they're doing it. Okay, so Acer had a G-Sync monitor they announced. I didn't actually get by to see them at the show, Jeff. So tell us about this thing.
Well, it's sort of what people wanted. It's G-Sync and IPS. It's sort of, you get the high-quality screen from IPS. You've got the G-Sync, which gives you the variable refresh rate. This is a 27-inch model with a 2560 by 1440 resolution. So it's not too high of a resolution like 4K, where you need a really insane graphics card to deliver frame rates. Probably the most interesting thing is the maximum refresh rate is 144 hertz. So it's not one of these G-Sync displays that's kind of, 30 to 60 hertz. This one goes all the way up to 144, which, when you consider the resolution, you got a high-end system, you can get this variable refresh rate that scales to really, really high levels. So this is looking like one of the most interesting displays of the show. I mean, I like the idea of having, a 4K panel in something like this, but just the reality of driving that panel at a refresh rate, above 60 hertz, or at a frame rate above 60 hertz is a little bit daunting. So this looks, I think, like maybe a better balance between the resolution and the maximum supported refresh rate for people who want really smooth motion and that extra sort of boost that you get from going on beyond 60 hertz.
Yeah, I will say that a 4K 60 hertz G-Sync monitor can let you get away with a lot in terms of, like, if you have a fast single GPU and your frame rates dip into the 40s, it doesn't feel like they're in the 40s. However, like, this is what everybody's been asking for since we kind of had this renaissance of display tech beginning, which is something that this is about the panel makers coming around, right? That you get an IPS display, so you have great, color and contrast and viewing angles and the whole thing, and the really high refresh rate. And this is freakishly better than, they didn't get above 60 hertz before this, really, not in any volume, right? And now we're at 144, so that's awesome.
Yeah, it's I think you sort of used to be able to get overclocked displays.
Oh yeah, you can overclock them and hope for the best. Yeah.
Like some Korean panel sold through somebody only in limited quantities that maybe didn't last for very long at that speed. So it's nice to see at least the panel. Once the panels are out there, then everybody has access to them, and you see a lot more displays.
Yeah. Now
this other Acer monitor, the one that has the edge-to-edge frameless display, certainly looks really cool in my opinion, aesthetically.
It is striking when you get a really thin bezel how you really notice it.
Yeah,
it is a nice thing. Now this is a 27-inch 2560 by 1440, 144 hertz fixed refresh rate. That's still going to be like great. I mean, it's not as great as variable refresh, but it's. I mean, at that.
Well, it's
at that,
TN as well. So
oh, okay. Well, moving on. Moving on.
Nah.
Well, the one thing I don't get about these thin bezel displays is why it's got this big red stripe along the bottom.
Right.
It just seems
like,
to be like.
Oh man, it really just blends and it disappears. Wah!
Yeah.
That's a style choice.
Well, and it's not to push things along, but to push things along. Asus's IPS gaming monitors, this next story that you wrote, Jeff, like they do a thin bezel thing, but they don't do the big red stripe. It's a little more svelte, and I actually like this one a lot, this ROG monitor. 27-inch IPS G-Sync and 4K. All the right buzzwords, says Jeff Gager.
Yeah, it's. I'm trying to refresh my memory on this one and figure out what the exact refresh rate is. I don't think they actually. Did you get any information on that refresh rate on this? Because this wasn't in the press release.
I'm fairly certain this is 60 hertz. And again, with the variable refresh rate, 60 hertz is not necessarily a killer. It's not as great as 144, 120, but you also have to think about the fact that it's 4K. You're not, unless you're talking about like really turning the visual quality down, or you're running older or less demanding games, you're not going to get 144 frames per second out of your video card very often anyway. So, I don't know. It's a good product. It's not necessarily like the super fast Twitch gaming monitor, but if you wanted a balance of a good gaming display and a good display for video editing and photo editing and just using at your desk and having high PPI, I mean, it's got all that stuff, and it's IPS, so it's again a quality step up from the first G-Sync panels.
Are people going to be able to buy this? Because I know the old ROG monitor has been kind of in and out of stock and hard to get. Did you get any sense from Asus on whether this display they've sort of recognized that there's a lot of demand, or?
I know that they recognize there's a lot of demand, and especially in North America, it's hard to get the current, like the PG 278Q or whatever, which is a great display. I did not get a read on the supply situation overall, with the exception of just that I think that that other display is a bit of an exception. But it's interesting because it's an exception in part because these things are selling so well. So enthusiasts are gearing up, laying out money for displays in a way they haven't in the past, and it's changing the market. So there may be a little bit of pain, but I think they're going to have probably higher estimates before they launch some of these new ones. And there will be more competition too. So hopefully it won't be like that's the one, you have to go get it, and everybody jumps on it at the same time. Because you've seen the Acer has some stuff, and some other companies are doing theirs, and we've got the FreeSync stuff coming. So,
well, that kind of leads into this other one, which is sort of FreeSync. It was weird when this one first came out because Asus issues this press release where they've got a smattering of details on some displays, and then we sort of get a little bit more information later in the show when Scott does the actual visit and sees some of this in person. But this other display, the MG279Q, a 27-inch panel, It's an IPS display. It's got the 2560 by 1440 resolution, so something that's a little bit easier to drive at higher frame rates. The refresh rate goes up to 120 hertz. And this has kind of got a weird thing where it supports DisplayPort 1.2a with adaptive sync, but it's not a FreeSync display.
Yeah, and this kind of gets into the weeds of like the politics of this stuff. Adaptive sync is the sort of phases extension to the DisplayPort spec that AMD shepherded through so that they could have FreeSync, or well, not really FreeSync, but Radeon cards that support adaptive refresh could look at the monitor, read the EDID information from the monitor, understand its capability to do variable refresh, and then activate that. So that's adaptive sync. FreeSync is AMD's brand that they put around adaptive refresh capabilities in conjunction with the Radeon. And so if you're a monitor maker and you're working with AMD on this stuff, then you could send your monitor to AMD and they will basically like certify that it is FreeSync capable, and you could put that stamp on your monitor. In this case, it looks like the Asus created a monitor that has variable refresh capability, and they communicated that by saying it supports DisplayPort 1.2a with the adaptive sync extension, but they did not, for whatever reason, work as closely with AMD and put a FreeSync stamp on the thing. And so this is kind of a monitor that represents a question, which is how free is FreeSync? Will AMD allow Radeon cards to work with this, and will they get, you know, all the support they need for this to fly? The interesting statement that Asus was making at the show was they actually had this thing running, and they had it running in a Radeon R9 200 series, and they had 120 hertz refresh, and I saw a 3D demo that was running at something less than 120 frames per second. It was not tearing, and it was completely smooth. It was pretty clearly running adaptive refresh, as far as I could tell, on the like in the Asus suite. So this looks great because although it's kind of a bit of a political football, apparently, it's IPS and 120 hertz with variable refresh, so it's like everything you want, right? So the question is, you know, what happens with it? And we'll talk about that because, let me see, our agenda includes quite a bit of FreeSync talk. Is that next, or are we skipping around? Oh, there's one other Asus display to talk about before we move on to that, which is this 4K.
Jumbo 4K.
Yeah, you know, they did that 31-inch Sharp Exo panel-based 4K monitor. It was dual tile DisplayPort, and it was kind of one of the first ones. Sharp had their own brand. I think Dell had one, but they were all based on the same panel. And it's like $3,500 when it first came out, and there weren't any cheaper options. Time has passed. And although there are lots of smaller 4K displays now, there's that sort of professional class 4K display. They're addressing that with this upcoming new product. And this thing is going to be DisplayPort with a single tile, and it's going to be really beautiful 10-bit color and 100% sRGB gamut and all or color gamut, yeah, all the things that you want, and it's going to be significantly cheaper than that $3,500 monitor, which I think came down to $3,000 or $2,500, but still costs a ton. So
it's like $1,500 now.
Yeah,
not quite that bad.
Which it could be somewhere in that range, but it's a pro class display for people who want really beautiful color. And I was kind of prodding them about this. You know, the big expensive, I've got one of the big expensive older 31 or 30.5 inch or whatever it is displays based on that Sharp panel. It has a lot of red bias in it, and I think that they're going for a little bit better balance out of the box, like pre-calibration on this one. So it's not necessarily the most exciting thing for just gaming, but as beautiful displays go, you this is better looking than all the others that we've been talking about. Just static pictures. So that's going to be nifty. But we should talk about FreeSync. And Cyril, did you write this up? 5 display makers have FreeSync panels on the way.
Mm-hmm.
So who's in the mix?
So there's Samsung, which I think was the first to announce FreeSync monitors. There's also BenQ, LG, ViewSonic, and a company called Nixius, who I've never heard of before. I don't know if they have products in North America. Let's see. Well, anyway, it's 5. Yeah, they do at Newegg. I guess I just don't know them. Yeah. Anyway, that's 5 display makers. They didn't say how many panels they have, but it's quite a few because Samsung, I think, has like 5 different sizes, and then the others, like LG, has a couple. So yeah, it's quite a few different panels. Resolutions, range from 1080p to 4K. Refresh rates, 60 hertz to 144 hertz. So it looks like there's going to be some pretty, solid competition, for G-Sync. There aren't really that many G-Sync panels available, I don't think.
G-Sync monitors. Yeah, there aren't that many. Yeah. We're going to see more of both in the new year, which is kind of what we saw at CES. But this is a good showing from AMD. You kind of have to think about the fact that they were first showing me their FreeSync demo on a laptop that supports adaptive refresh, which some laptop panels have done for a while, last year at CES. And this year at CES, they're actually rolling out displays, and they've got multiple monitor ASIC makers, the people who make the monitor chips that do things like control contrast and take in different input types and just drive the monitor display and do post or pre-processing and all that stuff. They've got 3 of those guys lined up to support their variable refresh tech now, and then they've got like 5 different monitors at launch. So I think most of these are like shipping January, February timeframe. So I believe that's right. So I saw like 3 or 4 of them, Cyril, on display at the AMD suite at CES, and that's our next story. Is we actually had I took my iPhone 6 Plus and just filmed in slow-mo
that's the way to do
it. Yes, listen to that. Filmed in slow-mo our little, you can see, I don't know if you can see this on, probably not on the live stream, but
I'm watching it now.
This is without FreeSync, without VSync, and so we got tearing, right? Which
major tearing, almost like they exaggerated it tearing.
And then you turn FreeSync on, and animation updates when it's ready. It looks smoother, and no tearing. Now this doesn't look super smooth simply because I'm recording in super slow mo, so every advance of the frame takes a little while. But in person, it looks like you want variable refresh to look, very similar to G-Sync, and has the right visual impact without any real drawbacks. So
is it fair to say that one of the big gaps, one of the big hurdles to cross between the way we experience visual effects content, particularly in video games now, versus what is required to experience it in a way that's going to make it feel like it's real life, is a rendering frame rate syncing issue, right? I mean, it's like, obviously you got to increase your graphical ability, and you have to increase the tessellation, all the different things, the art, all the things that are make it more and more realistic. Disney recently did the big thing about how they're doing eyes differently now. It's going to make it so much more real. But it seems like a lot of it is going to be a frame rate battle in order to get it to that point where it feels real. It kind of in the way that Peter Jackson did that whole 48 frames per second thing as a way of trying to make more realistic film, and it kind of was jarring to people because it just seemed like they were looking into a set and not a movie. But I guess my point is, like, I don't know, I feel like frame rate is a battleground that obviously all these companies are addressing, but that is not usually thought of as part of the sort of realistic graphics conversation.
Well, there's two issues there. I mean, you have the actual frame rate itself, which it needs to be quite high to approximate reality, and lower frame rates like 30, 24 tend to feel what people construe them as cinematic. And then you have the issue of synchronization, which
Right.
in PC gaming is a big thing, because if you have tearing, then that completely ruins the realism, and even if it's not supposed to be realistic, it looks bad. And VSync is not a good solution either, because it has performance drawbacks. So ideally you have both. Obviously you have very high frame rates and some sort of synchronization system like G-Sync or FreeSync.
Yeah,
or
well,
NavSync.
and the other thing is there are lots of ways to look at the same piece of the picture, the immediacy and smoothness of animation and having it be synchronized, having the timing right. But I think one of the most important ones we haven't really mentioned is literally like latency between when I make an input and when I get the visual feedback, which especially for things like virtual reality are extremely sensitive, extremely time sensitive, right? We're looking at, we need to be sub 20 milliseconds or maybe quite a bit lower than that.
Yeah.
Between when I move my head and when the picture adjusts, in order to approximate reality, because we're putting a display on somebody's face and creating a virtual world that's much higher resolution than inside of the frame of a monitor. So
I think Oculus is shooting for like 8 milliseconds or something like that.
Yeah,
like
and that takes all kinds of weird voodoo in order to do it well. And it's just hard because we haven't designed these things for that kind of speed or quickness. And so Jordan, I think to answer your question, it's all of the above. Yeah, all of these things together matter, and they matter more for interactive media than they do for cinema. With cinema, you kind of get smeary individual frames updated not that often, but when you look at it, your brain kind of blends it all together into something that looks kind of smooth and nice.
Right.
But with gaming, real-time graphics, we tend to go for sharp images, and then you want to update them really quickly, and that's probably the right choice, given that you want that feedback loop between what I do and what I see to be as tight as possible. So all of this is part of that picture, and it's great to see. We live in a great time, right? That we're working on all of those things together right now. So it's all getting better.
It is. It's a we're getting there slowly but surely. I mean, I saw a demo reel the other day, actually, or maybe I saw it today, of one of the large sort of graphical effects companies that does for both video games and film. They did a big demo reel that was released, and someone posted it, I think, on Reddit, and it's just spectacular stuff. So it's, and I haven't played games in a while, because I kind of got a life, but I'm sorry, I mean, I just don't have time. No, but it's actually, and I'll put a link in the show notes. It's kind of fun. It's the animation / FX reel from what is the company? Oh, Blur Studio, and they've done, they did oh my gosh, I'm blanking. What's the game? Oh my gosh, the one that was underwater, and then the sequel was above the
BioShock.
Yeah, BioShock. Thank you. Wow, that's a bad moment. Anyway, they did the BioShock. They did all the Batman games. Just all the cutscenes, all the real time stuff. Not real time, but whatever. And it's just spectacular. So it is one of those things where it's like you're a couple years away. You always feel like it's just within reach to have complete realism.
Yeah. Yep. And okay, so let's talk nuts and bolts on FreeSync a little, because I think we probably need to address that. AMD has, we kind of set it up before. We talked about Asus and their monitor that was sort of DisplayPort 1.2a, but not FreeSync. By the time this is interesting. There was kind of just some concern about, will AMD try to step in and control things, and you don't get to play if you don't play with them, if you don't get the certification, etc., etc. By the time I went to see AMD, it was late in the show. It was Thursday afternoon, then the AMD rep that I spoke with was basically like straight up ready to answer these questions by saying certification for FreeSync will cost $0. If you're not certified but you ship a monitor that is adaptive sync compliant, then it should work. As long as your monitor works right, we will not limit it. The Radeon cards will work with your display. So assuming they're good to their word, then that Asus monitor that we saw should work with FreeSync, and it instantly becomes one of the more interesting options just by virtue of the fact that Asus makes good stuff and the specs on it look great, and you know, assuming that the price is right and everything else is right, it should be really good. And that kind of drama creates this interesting question now going forward about 2015 is going to be about competing standards between G-Sync and FreeSync, where AMD is pushing for something they say is open and by all appearances appears to be, but they don't control, I think the latest numbers are maybe a third of the GPU market in the desktop. Nvidia controls the other basically 2/3 of discrete desktop GPUs, and they have their own thing. And I don't know what's going to happen there, but the fact that AMD has committed to, if your monitor is adaptive sync compliant, then we will support it regardless of whether or not it has FreeSync certification, kind of opens the door for the possibility that makers of G-Sync monitors could build in adaptive sync compliance, and like Radeon cards would work with them. Did you guys think about that when you saw all this? Like, getting AMD to say that explicitly means that Nvidia like kind of has an opening there. And my sense is that Nvidia, on the other side of this, is not likely to support FreeSync or adaptive sync monitors that are not G-Sync. So I think we're going to have a bit of a battle over this stuff in the next year, and I'm not really sure how it's going to work out. But I think everybody wants this to end up where you buy whatever monitor is best, you buy whatever graphics card you want, you can upgrade the graphics card, and it all just works. And it all works with a variable refresh rates. And I don't know if we're going to get there or not. It kind of stinks. Jeff?
We can only hope.
Just like
I have not much optimism about companies getting together and doing the right thing and agreeing on standards, I think.
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing with Nvidia is I think that I think they're not done with G-Sync. I think that they have started with variable refresh and they've kind of got that down. But I think they have other things they want to do, and playing in their own space with their own solution will allow them to do them without having to wait for anybody else. And so, you know, they've got their own ASIC, or not ASIC, but really FPGA. They've got their own box that they sell monitor makers just to put, you know, in as the electronics that drive the display. And I think they're going to be updates to that. I think they're going to do other innovative things that people may want. And so I think their justification for not just saying, hey, it's all good, we'll all just play together, is going to be that they're going to deliver compelling new things and they need to make money off of them. And I'm not sure that's bad. Like, I'm not sure that's not the worst thing. But I do hope.
I think the problem is if you get a monitor that only does one. As long as monitors can support both, then from a consumer perspective, you're at least not sort of locked in by your choice of monitor. Buying a GPU maybe means that you can use your options are limited from that perspective. But yeah, if the monitors can support both, that removes at least some of the problems from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, I don't know that that's going to happen for sure. I think it might happen in that one-sided way where NVIDIA's like, hey, we'll comply with that spec, but we're not going to let our video cards work with those things. So I don't know. We may have to see. Consumers may apply some pressure to affect this situation too. If FreeSync monitors are out there and are really good and there are no problems and they all work well, and it's just like seems simple, just turn it on, then it may be there may be some pressure on Nvidia. If on the other hand, these things are difficult to ship and have them work well, we've seen some issues with G-Sync. If there are more of them with FreeSync monitors, and especially because they're not using an FPGA, they can't reprogram them in the field completely. If it's really a lot of growing pains or teething pains, then it could be, I don't know, it could be less pressure on Nvidia. So I think that this is going to be interesting. It's going to be a bit of a fight, and I'm not sure exactly how it all ends up yet. So we'll see. But I expect that relatively soon we'll get our hands on a G-Sync monitor or a FreeSync monitor. We can test it and they'll hopefully start shipping, and people can use them. And the most important thing of all of this to me is whatever graphics card you have, whatever camp you're in, you need to see variable refresh in action because it's awesome. And it's something that you have to experience in order to understand. Not everybody will appreciate it entirely as much as I do, but I think that a lot of gamers will see it and say this is how it should have been all along.
All right,
Jordan, it occurs to me maybe we should take some questions from the chat because we just did
never
our
a bad
big
idea.
display.
We would be normally moving on to keyboards and mice, but we can talk to the mice in the chat room first. I mean the
gerbils.
The gerbils. That's right. I knew it was some sort of rodent.
So do we have questions about any of this stuff?
By the way, lest any of you get offended, I currently have a chimp as my photo right now. Let's just be clear on that. Okay, we're good.
Jordan, is your camera back on? Can we?
We can get my camera back on. Hold on a second.
Let's de-chimpify you.
I'm not wearing a shirt, but I mean, it's.
Well, neither is the chimp. I mean.
That's true. So hold on. Here we come. Oh, okay. He's back.
Ah, there he is. Okay. Do we have questions from the chat room? If you guys have them, throw them at us now. We'll take them. Otherwise, we're going to go through our super long list of stuff as long as we can continue talking. And then we'll abruptly stop in the middle because there's no way we're getting through all of this. So.
Yeah, are we even a quarter of the way through?
I don't care. I have no idea. There's lots to talk about, so.
Boy, it would suck if one of us had work in the morning. What?
Yeah. We've answered. Okay, any 5K and 8K displays shown off? I think the answer is yes, and I didn't see them. Did you like the LG ultra wide screens? CES is how many football fields? Like maybe 100 football fields of show space. It's ridiculous. I was not on the football field portion with the LG ultra wide displays, so I did see an ultra wide FreeSync display, and honestly, those things don't excite me very much because when I'm not gaming, I want to view the web or other content, and most of it isn't ultra wide. And most of the ultra wide displays I've seen are too small. Like I could get the same width in just a giant 16:9 display. So leave me alone and go do that. Like go do something really huge, or don't do weird aspect ratios because I'm not sold on them. Any news from CES from Nvidia on cards beyond the 980? No news from CES from Nvidia on cards beyond the 980. I think that they're going to happen, but they didn't announce anything at CES. Other questions? Guys?
Core M Android?
Core M Android. That is a thing that I've heard people talk about. Like, can you imagine a super fast Android tablet that has a Broadwell in it? And presumably it would be super fast. I mean, there's some Android apps that get emulated, but some of them are native x86, and it's a really fast CPU compared to most of the ARM SoCs out there, which kind of top out at like the Cortex A57 or that Denver CPU in the Nexus 9. I didn't see it, but I continue to hear people talking about it, and even I think there are people inside of Intel who would like to see like maybe a 13-inch tablet based on a Core M that runs Android. And honestly, I think that'd be great. There was some really good Windows 8 2-in-1s at the show, and looking at them, and I was reminded that I just don't care about using Windows 8 as a tablet. Like, and so if there was an option for an Android tablet with that, I'd be happy to see it. Maybe it was shown somewhere, but it wasn't in the same room as I was, as far as I know. Did you see anything that you really disliked at CES? Asks Steve from NE. Is that New England?
So I'm sorry, besides the crowds, the cab lines, and the food?
I was going to say, I was going straight for the food, because Vegas casinos own the restaurants inside of them, and you kind of are in that envelope. You have to eat at them, and they're expensive and bland. So I dislike that. I wasn't a fan of the super wide monitors. We talked about that. I don't know. I like tech generally. There weren't a lot of like super stupid ideas like you've seen in some years past. So I did see a few PC hardware like case makers who showed way too many things at once, which gets to be overwhelming, and it feels like you could spend like a day just trying to browse their product line and never find any single product that had a lot of thought put into it. So I don't know. I think I would prefer to see fewer products that are better. That's a trend that I think would be a positive one. And you did see some evidence of that the opposite of that happening at CES. I don't know if I don't think we have a lot of questions from the chat. Have we missed any? Let's see.
Skylake.
Any mention of Skylake at all? I heard rumors about Skylake, and that's about it. There wasn't anything concrete, and I don't want to repeat any rumors that were totally not. So I don't know.
Scott, just if anyone's talking about me, you need to tell me.
About who?
Like,
about you?
If people are talking about me behind my back, like I just feel like we know each other long enough. Like you can't not. You gotta tell me. So like if anyone at CES was like talking about me, are we clear?
Yeah,
it's fine.
We'll talk offline.
I'm not trying to make an issue.
No. We'll talk offline.
I'm just saying.
We'll talk offline. This is better to work out.
This does not bode well.
Yeah, no, we should talk.
You ever had that though, where you have friends be like, "Yeah, I'm a lockbox. I'm a lockbox." Unless someone tells me something about you, in which case,
totally not.
I will tell you. I mean, like, because I'm not gonna like I've been your friend longer, so. Great line from The Office where Michael says, "Jim has confided in me a secret, and because I am one of Jim's best friends, I will keep that secret for as long as I possibly can." Anyway, I've derailed our conversation. The point is, yeah, Vegas is Vegas.
Yeah, and that's the main thing I don't like. But
yeah,
we deal with it. We deal with it. I mean, I walked 7 to 9 miles each day, according to the little pedometer on my phone, and that's all on friggin' concrete and mostly between slot machines, winding your way where you can't go straight because they want you to be maximally exposed to gambling between point A and point B, and that makes me mad, but it's just life. So there you go.
That's lying. Let's
talk about Cherry's RealKey tech, because this is one of the cooler things that happened at CES, and it's totally different. So the Cherry guys had a press conference to announce this, and I don't think most people are going to understand what RealKey tech is, because the name is terrible to describe the product. RealKey is a infrastructure for keyboards that goes around keys. This is really not keys at all. And really the idea is that you pair this with Cherry MX switches of whatever flavor you prefer. And the reason that Cherry did this is A, because it's a good idea, and I think B, because their patent on the MX switches has expired, and there are a lot of competitors now. And those competitors are knocking off the MX switches, and you see a lot of cheap mechanical keyboards that have similar feel to the Cherry stuff. So they wanted to get themselves in a situation where they had a premium product that was differentiated and their own, and so they came up with this new setup. And the idea behind RealKey is basically they changed all the wiring that goes around keys, and the way that they monitor keys is actually analog, like key presses are measured throughout their depth instead of just being a 1 or a 0 on or off. And by doing that, and by doing some like signal processing on keystrokes, they claim to be able to do a better job at being responsive, because the 0-1 digital keystroke indicator, you actually have to have a dead time after a key has been struck for that switch to physically bounce before you can register another press. But with the analog filtering, then they can look at what's happening to the key and process that input with more granularity and understand, so you can have a gamer who's tapping really quickly, and you get more accurate registering of each key press with less latency between them. And they've also, as I understand it, basically rewired all the keys so they have true full in-key rollover. You can press all the keys at once and they all register. And they let me see, what else do they do? The latency, they say, is much lower. Okay, so I should give you the number they threw out on that. They said it was 20 milliseconds on average for a keystroke debounce delay on a digital system, and they said they could shorten it down to 1 millisecond. So that's a big deal. The other thing is ghosting, where you've pressed a series of keys, but you did not press like one kind of situated between them, but it falsely activates a key because of the way the keyboard's wired. And with this much more sophisticated wiring infrastructure, they don't have any ghosting. So they actually introduced a product based on their RealKey tech, and it's a very expensive, it's a $219 keyboard that they say is for professionals. So I think they're going to sell it in the US, but they're claiming they're going to market it for professionals. I think the idea is not to compete with their customers like Corsair and others who make mechanical keyboards for gamers. But if you look at this keyboard, Jordan, it has red backlighting for all the keys, so it's very sort of not professional looking in that way. And it's sort of way overblown in my picture. The keyboard is nice looking and sort of understated without the backlighting. And then the key switch type that they chose is Cherry MX Red, which is really the key switch type that gamers is generally floated out there as the one that gamers would want, because it's very soft touch, quick repeat type of thing. The thing about the Reds is really not that great for everyday typing, and so although this is marketed as a professional keyboard, I think it really is sort of Cherry's way of prototyping gaming keyboards, or testing the market for gaming keyboards based on their new tech. And presumably what happens from here is that gamer keyboard makers of gaming keyboards, mechanical keyboards, high-end keyboards like Corsair may adopt and license Cherry's technology and put it into their own products. And that may take another year or so, I don't know. But this is just sort of a next step for a very healthy market, in that we're going to replace the traditional keyboard infrastructure around the key with something superior, and then market against that. And I think what we're going to have to do is get one of these in like Cyril's hands, and Cyril, you'll have to use your hyper senses and your super fast gaming keystrokes and see if this is better. So you ready for that?
Oh yeah.
Have you got like a MAME with like track and field? Remember track and field where you pound on the buttons real fast and your guy runs?
I think that was before my time.
Oh man, well you gotta have something like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if the I mean, 20 milliseconds. I think they quoted that for all keyboards. I think it's probably lower for existing Cherry keyboards, like based on their like the diagram that they showed. So I don't know if like in practice it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah.
But it could mean that I think the advantage could be in the anti-ghosting, because the keyboard makers won't have to do any put in any special sauce to make sure that they have end key rollover. It would be just a standard feature across all Cherry keyboards, assuming they have these new controllers with the analog tech. So I think that's the more interesting thing probably in practice.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to get it and use it and sort of see what happens. I don't know whether Cherry is going to persuade other keyboard makers to do this or not, and that kind of depends on the response, I think, to this first keyboard. So, yeah, we'll see. That's really all I had to say on that.
How many other journalists were tracking on this Cherry and conversation? Because I feel like that's always been a niche of ours.
Yeah, it was funny because there weren't many other PC hardware guys in that sort of that beat at the press conference, but there was a guy from The Verge and somebody from like PC Gamer or something there.
I remember in that one CES that I did attend, I remember the going to the Razer little home. All the different Razer products.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I didn't get to see them this year, and they had some interesting stuff that I think we wrote up that we're not going to have time to talk about, but we'll try. But yeah, the Razer always does something interesting at CES, and it sometimes turns into a product, and sometimes it totally doesn't. But they always have something interesting. So, Jeff, though, I want you to talk about this thing, this mouse, the Rat Pro. You're a Rat fan, right?
Yeah, I've been using the same one for like 3 years now. It's this totally customizable mouse where you can change the actual shape of it to sort of better suit your hands. You can make it longer or wider, or change the angle of some of the panels. So it's great for finding something that fits my hand perfectly. And it's one of the few mice that has horizontal scrolling built in. So anybody that spends a lot of time in Excel knows that horizontal scrolling is a nice thing to have. So it's my favorite mouse by far, and they've come up with a new version that sort of takes the customization to the next level. It actually has a modular sensor, so you can decide whether or not you want to run a laser sensor or an optical one. You can switch out different wheels. They've actually made the side scrolling a little different. Instead of having a separate kind of thumb wheel, it sounds like they've got sort of a fairly sensitive analog sensor in the normal scrolling wheel, so that you can tilt from side to side. And they actually pitch this as kind of a way to peek around corners in games and have a high degree of control over that. So that sounds interesting. Plus, you've got all the usual sort of detachable panels in different shapes and sizes, and it looks like this one has removable feet for the bottom as well. So it's just kind of a more built up, more modular version of the original Rat mouse.
So are you buying this like as soon as possible, or?
Probably. They didn't say when exactly it's coming out. Mine is starting to double click a little bit on the middle click, which for a mouse that I've been using every day for 3 years is not too bad that it's held up this long. So yeah, I would buy one when it's available. It's wired instead of wireless, which I prefer, and I'm really curious about the scroll wheel and how that's going to work. So it's always been something that I've kind of used in productivity applications and not in games, but it sounds like it could actually be interesting for sort of first-person gaming.
Cool. Yeah, it looks like you could also just slice your hand up.
Nice.
Well, that's it's the way it looks. It looks kind of like it should be a transformer or something, and I kind of hope that there are color options other than the lime green. That it would kind of be a little bit weird that you can swap out basically every panel except for you're stuck with this lime green look, which is fine, but it's probably not going to match everybody's desktop. And you would think with a highly customizable design that colors would be part of it as well.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to one of the more interesting things that happened early at CES that we wrote about, which is, I was at the press conference. This is Asus did this new Transformer book Chi family, which is, or Chi, it's Chi, which is, Jeff, you've been a fan of the Transformers for a while, but this is, they took it to the next level here, didn't they?
Yeah, and it's new-ish, but then it's a whole family. So earlier this year, I think it was around Computex, is when they announced the 12.5-inch Chi, and that's when we sort of first heard of it. And it was supposed to be sort of a Core M processor, a high PPI IPS display, and sort of a 12.5-inch size with a detachable keyboard. They did this time around is sort of brought out that system, which is going to apparently start at only $700. But they also have a 10-inch version based on Bay Trail hardware and a 9-inch version as well. So you've got this family of detachable convertibles, all that run Windows 8.1, all with this sort of the same basic aluminum frame and this detachable keyboard that actually has kind of a hinge on it, so you can use it on your lap, unlike something like the Surface Pro where you need to sort of have a kickstand, or like some of the Bluetooth keyboards that come with sort of slate style laptops. So this is sort of an integrated laptop style convertible that you can have separate and have a completely detached tablet portion that doesn't have sort of the awkwardness of a keyboard that's folded around on the back, or the extra thickness of that unit. So
yeah, and you know, looking at this in person as I got to do, the 12.5-inch, the T300, is pretty amazing because it looks like an Ultrabook, and then the top detaches, and that's where all the computing power is. And I think, Jeff, that they hit the size almost perfectly for a lot of people. 12.5-inch corner to corner. There's rumors about a new MacBook that's going to be about that size, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a 2560 by 1440 IPS display. And I mean, geez, I don't know what more you want, right? Core M, it's the right processor. It should have nice long battery life, and you know, the keyboard and touchpad were decent on it, and it just looks and feels like a good Ultrabook, right up to the point where you can detach the top portion. And like I was saying earlier, I'm not all that excited about a Windows 8 tablet, but I might actually replace my ancient 5-year-old laptop with one of these on the strength of just it's really good regardless of how you use it.
well, and what I like too is there's a stylus option as well, which is, you know, a 12.5-inch space with a stylus is actually quite a nice thing to have. I was doing some sketching out on the Nvidia Shield tablet, which has a stylus, and it's great to be able to do that, and, you know, software that supports layers and things like that. But being restricted to a 12-inch screen and this kind of skinny little stylus that doesn't really fit in your hand all that well, I found kind of frustrating. But it sort of reminded me that, you know, if I had a bigger tablet with a, you know, more of a pen style stylus, that's a really powerful tool, which, you know, it's kind of what I get from this. It's kind of an all-in-one, you know, you can get real work done because it runs a real version of Windows. You have a decent processor in there. You have a screen where you can fit a lot of information on it. You have a decent sized keyboard, especially with it being 12.5-inch instead of 10-inch. And you also have sort of the flexibility to do tablet stuff, real work stuff, something with a stylus. You know, and also, you know, multiple configuration options. The 1080p version is going to be $700. It's going to be $100 more to get the 2560 by 1440 display, but looks like you can get a couple of different processor options. You'll be able to get, I think, up to 8 gigs of RAM in the system. And
yeah,
I
8
think
gigs.
Storage tops out at 128 gigs, which is, you know, there's only so much, I guess, you can fit in these systems, but it'll have a micro SD slot that you'll be able to add more storage with, and USB connectivity as well. So for a super thin, light system, I like that they didn't go high-end, super premium on this and started at something like $1,000. I think this is a lot more interesting because of the price point and the fact that it looks like they didn't sort of cheap out and do a plastic shell. I think it's all aluminum and unibody construction. So.
Yeah, I don't know if that back, I don't think it's all aluminum. I think that it's got an aluminum ring and then it's plastic on the back, but it's really high quality, high grade stuff, right? Anyway,
and then there are other ones too.
Yeah, the T100 is like the new T100. We had the old T100. And speaking of materials and stuff, look at the upgrade on the materials on that puppy. That is a lot better than the old T100, which was all fingerprint smudges and plastic, right?
Yeah.
And then the display resolution, 19 by 12, awesome. It's a bay trail.
And it's 16 by 10 instead of 16 by 9.
Yeah, that's better. And it's the bay trail is a quad with the 2.39 gigahertz burst. I mean, geez, that's way better than my laptop. And it starts at $400. I mean, the only big problem is apparently the memory is kept at 2 gigs, which sounds awful. But
see, I think that's probably 2 gigs is enough to cover what you want to do on Bay Trail. You know, having used the T100 a fair bit, I don't really feel like RAM is a limitation on that system. It's just it's a netbook, so you don't want to do too much on it. But I don't feel like it would be a substantially better system with 4 gigs of RAM when you've got the same processor. I don't think necessarily. At least I haven't run into situations. It's not like you're doing a lot of heavy photo editing or.
See, I might do some in the just out.
I think the processor will disappoint you before the memory will.
You know, it's not that hard with 4 cores to do a resize on an image. It's not super heavy photo processing, but you need to have enough memory to hold the image. So. I don't know. It still though. I mean, the price you can't. This is just like the last one because whatever fault you point out, it's $400. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So, and then they got this little one, the T90, which is basically a 9-inch tablet with Windows plus a little keyboard, no touchpad. So it's kind of weird.
No touchpad, low resolution as well. It's only 1280 by 800, and it's a little bit thick too. I mean, it's not like this. They made a super thin, smaller one.
It is
a little bit chunkier, but it's only $300, and all of these prices include the keyboard.
Right. This is netbook plus tablet kind of the Neo netbook, right? Which sounds nefarious, but. Isn't entirely. Anyway, it looks okay. So, you know, it's interesting to me just because now there were some other announcements that we are maybe going to talk about here that we covered from the show. Asus is at least emblematic of PC laptop makers in that these things are a lot better than they were last year, and they're better than the year before that, and they're better than the year before that. PC laptops have not been a good place in a lot of ways, and I feel like that now we've got these 2-in-1 designs that make sense. They have better materials. They have good IPS displays with high PPIs available. They have nice price points that aren't super premium like a Surface Pro 3. And you know, the materials and the touchpads and the keyboards are reasonably decent. And so, you know, we're kind of getting to the point where we have a reasonable approximation of an old MacBook now. Plus the detachability and stuff. And Core M, especially on those sort of mid-range to high-end devices, you're talking about a nice combination of computing power and battery life. It feels like that 2015 could be the year of the laptop. That it prompts people to go ahead and upgrade if they've been holding off. And you know, hopefully in combination maybe with Windows 10, we get to a situation where, you know, man, if you go to a coffee shop now or something, we were walking by like Starbucks at CES and it was like MacBook. That was it. And you know, I looked at them and I thought, I can't blame those people because I know they're all picking the same thing, but there's a reason. And PC laptops have not been in a good place. And honestly, I think there's going to be a better case to be made for getting a Windows laptop if these devices fulfill expectations and Windows 10 isn't too bad. If Microsoft can kind of get out of its own way, then we could be in a situation where they're compelling. And with the detachability and the touch, if they can get that a little bit right, if it can be a decent experience using these things as tablets, then you know, maybe that becomes a compelling reason to go ahead and go with Windows instead of the Mac. So.
Yeah, speaking of the Mac thing, I dug up my old 2008 MacBook for some reason, and well, believe it or not, it's actually really nice to use still. It doesn't feel very slow. It runs the latest OS 10. The touchpad is great. The keyboard is great. The display is, you know, it's not perfect. It's a cheap TN panel, but it's nice. And I mean, it's still, for all intents and purposes, it's a little too heavy. That's the only thing. But aside from that,
This is the round. This is sort of the round design, right?
this is the first generation aluminum MacBook.
Oh, that's right, the unibody.
Yeah, the first time they
When
did the
that came out.
unibody, but it's like 6 years old and it still works great. So
Yeah.
there you go.
All right, so we are going to run out of time, guys, but let's slip into a bit of a compressed format. I want to talk about a couple other things that Intel was showing, at least.
The lightning round.
Yeah. So first of all, you know, the next unit of computing, they had the NUCs out, the Broadwell based ones, at CES, and so this is the next generation, and they keep getting slimmer with the standard chassis. So this is pictured here, the chassis that is the one that it's all laptop parts. There's not room for a 2.5-inch SSD, but you can see they just keep getting slimmer. So there's several millimeters at least slimmer than the last one, and you know, it still does all this stuff, and it should be a little bit nicer, a little bit quieter because of having Broadwell in it. So they also have these interchangeable lids now that they're doing, so you can put something in the lid that's not like standard equipment. It's sort of a means of expanding a very small system, and so they have one with NFC sensor if you want that. They have another that has a hoppage TV tuner, so if you want a TV tuner for your super small NUC next unit of computing, then you can actually get a lid that has that integrated. And I don't know if that's just a concept or if it's going to come out as a product, but I think it probably is going to eventually come out as a product. And so it's kind of an interesting thing that they're doing there. So I think we'll get our hands on one of these soon and get to kind of review it. But you know, Intel is setting a trend here with these super small PCs, and I think that some of the PC makers are following suit. You know, the place where this probably means where they get the most traction right away is, man, if I were managing corporate desktop PCs and I could have a little brick that just did it all, that would be what I do. Like, that's it. I think for most people, if you don't need a workstation, like a real workstation, then here's your solution, right? And if it breaks, we just pull it out and put another one just like it in, and that's it. So it's kind of nifty. Speaking of, though, just turning your PC into a complete commodity, you have to see the other thing they did with the NUC. There's the NUC Team, which is the compute stick. This is kind of like a Chromecast. It's got a Bay Trail chip in it, Bay Trail Atom chip in it, 2 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs of flash storage. It has an HDMI port sticking out. It's really not much bigger than a Chromecast, but it's $149 and it's a complete Windows PC. It has that Windows with Bing free version of Windows, and so for $149 you get a whole PC. It has a micro SD card slot, a USB port. I think it's powered by that, and you know, you can just hang it off the back of a TV. In fact, I think a la Chromecast, they have a little bendable HDMI extender thing, so if this is a little too long to fit into your PC, then you can just, you know, plug it into that, or not fit in your PC, fit into your TV. You can plug it into that and just have a living room PC for $149. Jeff, we've been talking about Steam streaming, bringing your desktop games to the living room. Here you go. Like we're done. Right? I mean, this is something that looks like a
Although that doesn't have, I mean, that you would need to have the USB Ethernet adapter for that, probably.
Depending on whether you were going to do your streaming over Wi-Fi. This is 802.11n. You know, I've used it over Wi-Fi in, and it's not too bad if you have a fast enough router. I've got a
What sort of depends on also like where your router is in relation to
Sure.
where you're putting this thing versus how many people are in the same room on tablets and stuff streaming Netflix and
Right, and well, I think the key for me was you need to use 5 gigahertz band because at least I live in the suburbs, and there's 2.4 gigahertz networks like crazy out here. All the channels are way over occupied. It's terrible. But if you go to 5 gigahertz, there's less interference, and it's just faster anyway. And I don't worry about cables. I can stream to my home theater PC. I don't because it's actually a really fast computer, but just for test, I've done it, and I've done the Shield tablet hooked up to my TV, and in both cases, like, it's an acceptable solution. So I think this could be. The other thing is, of course, that with that USB connection, you could go ahead and do Wi-Fi, or not Wi-Fi, but Ethernet to USB converter, and get that low latency connection. It doesn't even have to be super high bandwidth USB 3 to be sufficient for that type of thing, I think. So I don't. This is
more interesting for streaming is the AMD powdered out a little Zotac Pico PC that's got, I think, a Mullins chip in it, but it's got gigabit Ethernet built in and DisplayPort as well. And you actually get USB 3 connectivity, multiple USB ports. So if you wanted to have sort of a lightweight home theater PC that had some local storage, you could add, you know, a USB connected hard drive for additional storage, and then you got your Ethernet built right in. It's slightly bigger, but it's still, you know, something you could fit in a pocket.
Yeah, I mean, that could do it. That could do it too. Do we get a price on that? Let me see.
I don't think we have a price on it, but it's with Bing. The Bay Trail version sells for, I think, $190.
Right.
So it's in kind of that same 200. I mean, I would expect them to put it under $200 because that gets them into the free version of Windows threshold, I think.
I just want to say that the picture that I sent you guys, which one you wrote this up, Jeff? You made my hand look really weird, dude. Look at that. I mean, my God, it's like I got a flipper.
Color a bit.
It's like I got flippers or something. I mean, that's
the second one is a little bit weird.
Yeah, that's pretty jacked up. I was like, why wouldn't you crop that like an inch higher? Like, what were you? Were you just like messing with me, or?
I can't remember what. I did crop so many pictures and wrote so many stories last week.
Yeah, it was a busy. It was a busy time. That was that late in the day, and I don't know. It was late in the show.
I like how the protective layer on the protective plastic cover is still stuck on, and you're just kind of like peeling over in the corner, like nobody thought that maybe we should take that off the display unit at CES by like the end of the week. No, man, we were going into just fresh waters there, man. Nobody else had gotten that look. I've known the guy at Zotac who does these for years. He was back at like 8-bit and I think maybe DFI and did motherboard designs and stuff, and he's been doing these Z-boxes forever. Jackie, and anyway, he like saw me come in and he's like, hey, come back here, and like he gave me the tour. So that was one of his favorites, so he pulled that up. I don't know that he had been showing that off to everybody, so it's pretty cool. What else do we have to cover before we wrap this, guys? So one of the other things that was a thing at CES was USB 3.1 with the Type-C connector, which is the turn it either way and it still works USB connector that, thank God, we finally have it. Like, and they're starting to appear, and then USB 3.1 also has 10 gigabit instead of 5 gigabit peak bandwidth, and can go up to 100 watts of power supplied. So it can be kind of the all-in-one connection for your stuff. And then I saw a sign. I didn't really get a chance to stop and chat with anybody about it, but it looks like they're now channeling DisplayPort over USB 3 or 3.1. So you could have like a single port that carries your display signals, all your high bandwidth transfers, that does your power supply, and is a nicely reversible connector, a la the lightning connector, you know, that basically becomes the one port, and you get like 4 or 5 of those on maybe less on a laptop, and you're done, you know.
So that's a thing, and I think that we're going to see those coming out this year in various places. And there will be some confusion initially because people will be like, what is that USB port? Like, it's still called USB, right? It's just called 3.1 Type-C. So
I'll be interested. I like the idea that it's the reversible. It can go into the way.
yeah, I mean, that's huge, and I think that the hope is that this just, like, on the bottom of every tablet and stuff, this just completely replaces the current connections, which are terrible. So yeah, happy to see that. So I want to do one more thing and then I'm done, guys, unless there's something else in the show that really excites you guys. I want to talk about...
I have one quick story at the very end of the show, but I'll save it for the end.
Oh, cool. Cool. Okay. Well, let's just real quick, let's talk about this thing. This is a Cooler Master concept that they did with a company called Cool Chip Technologies. That when I saw it, Jeff, you wrote this up. When I saw it, I didn't remember that we had written up the Sandia National Laboratories air exchanger thing that apparently this is based on. But it...
Well, it was back in like 2011 that we wrote that up, so it has been a while.
Right. Cool Chip is a company out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. I think it's MIT grads, a couple of guys who are trying to make this go, and they're working with Cooler Master. And the idea here is basically that this wicked-looking metal thing here that is your heatsink is also a fan because it spins. And so they had a demo of it, and it was awesome. And the way that this works is you can kind of see in the pictures here, they have a base that doesn't move, and then they have a bunch of grooves, kind of like a record or something, but really larger, coarser grooves. And then they have a top that does spin, and it has matching grooves on it, and it sits down on top of the base and is very close to it, but actually doesn't make contact, and heat is transferred through air in a very small gap to that spinning upper base. And apparently it's effective enough heat transfer that that it works. And then the sort of benefit from there is that instead of having a fan spin, you actually have the heatsink itself spinning, and it can be more efficient potentially. So they had a concept here, and then they had a concept where they had they had a concept where it was just the spinning heatsink, and then they had another one where they had surrounded the spinning heatsink portion with a fixed ringed heat pipe type of arrangement, where you had like fins in a circular arrangement with the heat pipe going through them, and then the spinning fan was inside. And so I think Cooler Master may turn this into a product, and I wouldn't be shocked to see that happen this year. This is a concept, but I think they're getting fairly along with it to be showing it at CES. And there are a couple of questions about it. Both of and I didn't think to ask this at the time. Somebody asked in the comments, what happens if you turn this on its side, because there's that air gap, and would it tolerate that? Because all the demos have it just sitting flat, and so there's a question of would it work in multiple orientations. And the other thing is, I didn't try sticking my finger into the spinning metal thing. It looks like it would just jack you up pretty bad.
So, I think we review one of these and you just take a carrot and slowly insert it into the spinning mass.
I was going to say whoever does it.
Photography, 240 frames per second, we'll shoot that.
There you go. I was going to say whoever does it has to sacrifice a finger. But the carrot,
maybe a hot dog would be better.
There you go, a hot dog. Yeah,
shredding potential.
What will it do to this lump of meat that approximates a human finger? So, anyway, I don't know. It is interesting though. New concept, totally different concept in PC cooling, and I think it's going to turn into a product. So, I think we'll know more later this year. Anyway, guys, that's it for me. I think we've had enough. I think it's been a lot of CES coverage, and
seriously,
we could talk.
I'm tired just listening.
We could talk a lot more stuff because there's a lot of stuff. But I think plus, Jordan, I'm very eager to hear your story.
Well, my story, it's not wildly exciting. I was walking into this week. I walked into a clothing store, and it was a nice clothing store. And so there's a doorman who opens the door for you as you're walking in the store. And as I'm walking into the store, walking right by me is this guy with glasses and white hair. And I just had this moment where I was like, I know that guy. And I walked in and I just said, immediately I said to the doorman, I said, do you know who that was who just walked out? And he goes, no. And I said, that was Tim Cook. And he's like, who's Tim Cook? I said, he's the CEO of Apple. And then I did a thing where I went, wait, no, that wasn't Tim Cook. Because you had that thing where like you had the immediate like identification of the name, and then you're like, well, no, it's the wrong person.
Right.
It's the wrong person. And I'm just racking my brain. And I went, no, it was Eric Schmidt. And sure enough, it was Eric Schmidt. And what happened is he walked right past me out of this clothing store, and waved to some guy. And I look around, and there's a driver in a gold Mercedes, or Mercedes, yeah, Mercedes, who was clearly his driver, and he was getting picked up to go somewhere. And it was, sure enough, it was Eric Schmidt. And I was like, wow, what a random bump in. It was good times.
Yeah, it doesn't happen to me in Kansas City.
No.
Really.
Well,
no.
to be honest, it doesn't happen a lot in New York City either. I mean, it's kind of an odd place to see someone like that. But again, I mean, they have the big Google owns the largest square footage building in New York City. It's the size of a city block. It's insane. But anyway, so Eric Schmidt, $3.8 billion worth of geek.
There you go.
Princeton grad. So that was my run-in with fame. So that brings us to the end of the podcast. Before we go, Mr. Wasson, now that you're back, what are you working on?
I have more things than I can handle. So I got some mobile-related stuff. Of another phone review that's kind of late, but semi-secret, and then another thing I can't talk about because that's the way it is in my life, Jordan. So I apologize. Really? But there's good stuff in PC hardware and mobile coming from me very soon.
Excellent. Jeff, how about you?
I've got the USB version of the 850 Evo SSD that I'm going to take a quick look at next week, and also an MSI X99 motherboard. And then I'll be back on our sort of next-gen storage stuff. The last piece of that puzzle is coming together now, so some new stuff on that will be coming soon as well.
Excellent. Cyril?
I'm working on a BenQ G-Sync monitor, which is sitting next to me right now. And yeah, that's about it for the next little while.
Excellent. And keep going to therapy. It's really helping.
What the hell?
I'm sorry, was that not public?
Man.
I'm going to keep going to therapy. It's really helping. That's it for us here on the Tech Report podcast. Hit us up on our show notes, techreport.com. Our Twitter handles are all there as well. And we will see you on the next episode as we plunge forward into 2015. So Jordan Drake here for the rest of the team at the Tech Report for the podcast saying so long.